So thank you for inviting me. It's a really big pleasure for me to be here. I want to share with you some thoughts about segmenting audiences, and particularly segmenting young audiences, and some of the challenges around how fluid or difficult that market is to track and to target. This is basically the basis of everything. As a company, our big idea is to keep feeling fascination for the audience. As soon as you start to make assumptions or rely on stereotypes of what you think audiences want, you will not get them. You have to be totally fascinated by who they are, what they're thinking, what they're doing, and you have to be in constant dialogue with them in order to understand them. We should just say, if you want to tweet while we're doing it, these are the hashtags you should use. We should say that. We started with three of us, and the three things we shared, the Morris, the Hargreaves, and the McIntyre in our company, we were all fascinated by the audience. And we all wanted to understand why they did what they did, and more importantly, why they didn't do what we wanted them to, which was visit and attend. So we wanted to get inside their heads. And most of the research we saw was just like looking in the rearview mirror. Who came? How old were they? Where did they live? Where did they come from? How many tickets did they buy? And what we wanted to do was look beyond that. We wanted to look ahead. Well, what might people do next? How can we understand them? Why didn't some people come? The people who came, will they come back? Why will they come back? Why won't they come back? So we wanted to ask all of these kinds of questions. And now there are 48 of us doing it. And it's a kind of insatiable curiosity for trying to understand, get inside people's heads and understand what they do. And we're doing it for all of these kind of people and more now, because all of these organizations and lots of others have the same need to really, really understand their audiences. So it's interesting, with the advent of things like ticketing databases and systems and big data and whatever, is we're finding a lot about what people are doing, but we're still not really finding out why they're doing it. And so we have more data than we've ever had, but what we really lack is insight. So insight is a real premium. And what I'm going to show you today, the culture segment system, is a way of trying to organize some of that insight. So if you haven't already segmented yourself, as was described earlier, and you don't mind getting a smart little email from me, then you could try just hitting this on your phone or whatever while you're doing it. It will take you about 90 seconds. And you know that thing anyway, when people do PowerPoint presentations, is there are like 3 points on the slide. You've read them all. I'm still on point 1. In your downtime, you could just do this. So while I'm talking. I won't be offended. And also, if you haven't done it already, then it'll make some of the rest of the presentation look a bit more relevant. Okay, I'll leave that up there. So when you go there, you can also do it in any language you like, but including Norwegian, so it'll be even quicker. You don't have to take it in Norwegian. You can take it in Polish if you want. But the fundamental thing is this: is that we can't treat the audience as being the same. One size does not fit all. And that is not just true of the whole audience, it's also true of young people. We often say, oh, well, look, what we've got in our audience is some young people and some older people, but young people are not the same. So organizations make huge assumptions about what young people are like and what young people do, but young people themselves are very different to each other. There isn't one standard type of young person, and they're all the same, just born between these ages. So we have to understand people beyond just their age. But the problem is we can't yet target every single individual as a one-off. I can't create 380 different marketing campaigns for you and monitor them all and track them all. That's not yet possible. So if you're not all one, but yet I can't possibly do 380 separate campaigns. I need to do something with you that will help me target you. So I need to divide you up into different kinds of people that share something, that makes me put you in that group rather than that group. So what should that something be? And this is the question. Some people will group you by demographics. You were all born in these years, these ages. You sit over there. You were older. You sit over there. Some people will do it by geography. Or you live in central Oslo. You can go here. All the Bergen people, you can go over there. And some people will do it by, who's bought a ticket to dance in the last 6 months? Right, you can all sit there. So we can look at behavior. We can look at all of the things. But they're very unsatisfactory because very few of them are good predictors of what's going to happen next. In fact, I can prove this. The people who've booked a Shakespeare ticket, at a theatre, they're the most likely people to be targeted by the marketing department for the next Shakespeare. Okay? And you'd think, well, that's really clever, isn't it? Because we know that they've been to Shakespeare, and we know that they're interested, and we know that they've been to our theatre, so these are the people. These are the core people. What's the average response rate? What conversion to ticket sales from an email like that? Anybody? Anybody got an answer? What percentage buy tickets if you target people who've booked before? 10%, you're doing really well. 10% is one of the highest ones, I think. Anyone else? Anyone less? 4. 4 is actually the industry average. It's interesting. Yeah? So what we're actually saying there is that 96% of the people we regard as most likely to book don't book. Yeah? So our predictive power of using past behavior as a segmentation tool is 4%, which is pretty rubbish, isn't it, really? And we still can't explain why the other 96 don't book. Actually, I can, because I've asked them. They don't book because they've just been to one. Now they might try something else. And arts marketing increasingly only tells you about the things that you've already booked for. And we don't tell you about the other things because you haven't booked for them. But actually, what I want to book next is something different than the thing I just booked. But I can't find out about it because you won't tell me. And you won't tell me until I've booked for it. So it's kind of catch-22. So I should go back. So one of the ideas is that we do this by the idea of shared needs. What is it you're trying to get from booking a theatre ticket? What is it? What are you doing? Is it that you're fascinated by the topic? Is it that you want a night out? Is it that you're celebrating an occasion? Is it, what's the circumstance? What's your level of knowledge? What's your particular interest? What's your driver? And in doing this, we need to make a distinction between looking at generations, which is a really useful thing to do, and a lot of work that's done around what's the difference between, say, the millennial generation and their parents is really interesting in terms of technology, in terms of social attitudes, in terms of all kinds of things. There are big shifts in society that provide a big context for us to understand why young people might see the world differently, collectively. But, and here's the but, there's a big difference between what I would call societal meta-trends. This is a generation that's more comfortable with technology, that lives their life online, that is able to connect with people in a way that older generations don't, and et cetera. That's really useful to know. And individual personal psychology, which is, of all of those people who've all got a smartphone, they're not all the same. What's the actual content they're putting on Twitter or Facebook? It's not the same stuff. It's different stuff. So they might be all using social media, but they're not using it in the same way for the same purpose with the same content. So it's useful for us to know that social media is now a big idea for young people, but that's not enough. We need to know, what's the content? And to prove that, I'll do this. Here's 2 baby boomers. I don't see them sharing much. And equally, I'm going to give you two millennials. There's Harry from Harry Styles, and this young lad here, yeah. So I'm not making any inference, by the way. So all I'm saying is just because you share a birthday doesn't mean that you share a worldview or a set of values or a way of thinking, or you have the same perception of what attending culture or arts might do for your life. So if you look at the evolution of segmentation, we start with things like demographics. How old are you? Where do you live? And so on. And that's useful. I mean, we can see it. It's useful to know, are we getting families, are we not getting families? But it doesn't tell you why. Visiting behavior. You went to Shakespeare. Well, there's some use in that, but as we've seen, 4% is not very predictive. Geography. Now, there's some value in that, like, how far would you travel? Do you live here? Is there public transport? How often would you come, and so on? But all the people who live in a particular neighborhood are not the same. There are segmentation systems that use your postcode, your address, to put you into a segment. In my street, the leading, the most commonly used segmentation system in the UK says that all the people that live along my little row of houses, we're all in the same segment. I couldn't find any single one of them to come to dance with me. Not one. Not one. And they're just not like me. I don't know about your neighbors. Are your neighbors like you? Well, mine aren't. So, and also, even in my house, we're not the same. So my wife is not in the same segment as me. My sons are not in the same segment as me either. So you can't say we live in this house when we're all the same segment. We live in this street, we're all the same segment. Doesn't work. So lifestyles and attitudes begin to be interesting. How do you live your life? And there's a lot of work done around kind of urban, audiences and the kind of rise of a kind of metropolitan culture. And there's some really interesting patterns in there, but it's notoriously difficult to segment by because it's slippery. You can't really find it. And so ultimately we ended up with this idea of values, deep-seated values that frame the way that you think about yourself and the world. And we borrowed that from this, which is a thing called hierarchy of mind, which down the bottom is opinions and behavior and all the things you do. But the higher level things in hierarchy of mind are things like purpose, identity, values, beliefs. This is how you see yourself and how you see the world. These are deeply held, deep-seated cultural beliefs and values that shape what you do. Now, we're not robots, so it's not like if you hold value X, you will buy that Shakespeare ticket. It would be great if it was, wouldn't it? That would be really easy. But it means that you are predisposed to buy the Shakespeare ticket or not, and you may be predisposed to buy it for certain kinds of reasons or not. And so even something like membership, we'll see that some people will join an organization because they want to express their support and affinity for it, whilst others will join it because they've done the calculation and they can save 300 krona by buying this ticket and whatever. So, and that's based all up here in values and identity. I was having a really interesting conversation with Ingrid about if you work in the public sector, so if you work in healthcare or education or one of those kind of caring professions, you're several times more likely to be interested in attending an arts event than if you work in banking, finance, retail, commerce. Why is that? Why is that? It's because these identities, values, and purpose things that guide the way we see the world not only drive us into attending the arts and for particular reasons, but they also drive us into our career choices. So if you see the world as a collective thing where we're all in it together, and as society's a wonderful thing and arts organizations make society better, then you're very supportive. If you see the world as everyone for themselves and you're quite individualistic, you will have a very different relationship to the arts. So all of those other things are down here because they're lower level, but what we've tried to segment by is something up there. What are these deep-seated things that frame what we do? And Culture Segments was born because clients of ours like Tate and British Museum were clamoring for a system that would help them not only understand how people are behaving when they're visiting, but also how to reach the people out there. Now, there's all kinds of other systems that help you target people, which are great, but it doesn't tell you what you should say to them. Culture segments gives you an idea of what the content of the conversation might be. It's based on 250,000 sample in 15 countries. So it's now become effectively an international standard for our audience segmentation. What's really interesting is all the countries are different. We're finding that the segments are true in every country, but the proportions are quite different. And some of the ways that the same segment behaves in different countries is different. But the fundamental system holds. And I'll whiz you through these. So anyone in the audience, Essence, just give me a wave. Okay, right. So you are the core arts attenders. You're the real people. So you're really the most obvious culture attenders we have, because the reason it's called Essence, by the way, is because arts and culture isn't something you do; it's who you are. You can't imagine life without it. It would be like cutting oxygen off if we didn't give you it. So it's a way that you think, it's a way that you express yourself, it's a way that you live your life. Good news: discerning, spontaneous, independent, sophisticated. Always start with the flattery. The negatives here are you are just really, really awkward. You're incredibly independently minded, which means that you're not natural joiners. You don't think, oh, I ought to join that. You'll join if you need to, but you are incredibly self-sufficient. You're not reliant on what other people think, or really even swayed by what they think. You like to make your own mind up. Even if it has a bad review, you'll say, I'll be the judge of that, and go along and do it yourself. You might even enjoy liking things that no one else likes. And you'll enjoy not liking things that everyone else likes, because it's a way of asserting the fact that you're independently engaging. Stimulation, anybody? This is obviously the best segment. So stimulation, experimental discovery. What I would say is we like big ideas. We really, really like big ideas. Put this with this, particularly if it breaks rules. If they've collided two things that we hadn't put together before, and that provides us with a new way of seeing the world. But we particularly like it if it breaks all the rules, like it's on the roof and it's at midnight, and we like it if it's underground or pop-up or slightly kind of unusual or different. We like happenings and events. We like novelty. So although we're quite intellectually driven and we like the kind of thrill of it, we kind of want to do it socially. So we like to do it with a beer in our hand with some friends. And we'll take any risk you like. We don't mind, because if it's rubbish, we'll be back next week to see if next week's better. We had we had a beer. It was good. But stimulation also need to be the first to know. So they like to tell everyone else. So people are always saying to me, I'm going to Amsterdam for the weekend. What should I see? And I go, right, you don't want to go to the Rijksmuseum. Everyone goes to the Rijksmuseum. What you want to do is there's this little place that no one else knows. And then they come back a couple of weeks later and go, we went there, it was amazing. I go, stick with me. I know. I see. So that's very needy, isn't it? That's very needy on my part. But what can I say? So enrichment. Have we got any enrichment in the house? Are we waving? Okay. Really? Really not? Looking at one over there. So enrichment are really interesting because they really value heritage and culture and things that are established, art forms that have stood the test, artists that have stood the test, playwrights that have stood the test of time, that are really, really recognized as being the best. And they don't settle for less than that. They have very high standards. So they like things that are proven. So Shakespeare would be good. Royal Shakespeare would be even better. Yeah. And they don't want you to mess with it particularly. So if you set your Shakespeare on the moon, that's not going to fly with these people. This is about quality. This is about recognizing that these things make our lives better because they are so good. They're so powerful. So they're really, really passionate about what they do. They just are very careful about what they choose. My best quote in a focus group from one of these people was, they said, I'm not saying that all contemporary art is bad, but we won't know which are the good bits for another 20 years. Anyone in affirmation? Great, thank you. Affirmation, my favorite segment. Affirmation have, as adults, made a deliberate conscious decision to engage with culture. They may or may not have done it as children, but broadly speaking, in their families, it probably wasn't like a massively high priority. So you might have been to museums and things, but it wasn't like what your family did. But as adults, you've said, you know what? When we go to arts and culture, it makes our lives better. And so we should do more of this. It's a bit like going to the gym or reading a book. The more of it you do, the better it is. And if you, at the weekend, you do something cultural, you feel like you've had a good weekend, rather than you've not just stayed in and done your laundry. So it feels like it's kind of a worthwhile thing that you're a better person for having done it. And if you've got children, you really want your children to have arts and culture. Most of the other segments kind of just do arts and culture because it's there, whereas this segment is like, no, I want to do more of this. So the big question would be, given the fact that they have sky-high results for, I would try this, I'd try this, I'd try this, I'd try this, that they don't, mostly. And the reason they don't is we are rubbish at persuading them because they're looking for endorsement and guarantees. Is this the right one to choose? I don't want to choose the wrong one. It's my first time. Go easy with me. Which is the right one? And they don't believe our marketing because marketing says everything's good. So you need some independent person to tell you that it's okay. And we're not very good at getting our people to provide that endorsement and confirmation for these people. So things like TripAdvisor and social media are brilliant for saying, yeah, we went, it was good, you could go too. And when we activate those channels for affirmation, bang, off it comes. I'm just working with a contemporary art gallery at the moment. Can't get affirmation, just can't get them. They put on a photography show, affirmation through the sky. Why? Photography is easy, isn't it? We can look at photography. You don't need to know about art to look at photography. We've all taken photographs, so it's really familiar. So I can just go and look at photographs and not feel stupid. So affirmation are flooding into this exhibition. And that's a real entry point. Expression, anyone? Yeah, man. So expression are people, okay? You're the glue that holds the audience together. They're really community-minded, communally minded. I'm guessing that you've got more, if you're on Facebook, you've got more contacts than the rest of us put together, okay? You're just really good at keeping up with people and networking and making relationships with people. You make some of us look really antisocial. Because you're just that good at it. But you also believe that arts and cultural organizations are kind of the pillars of civilization and of society, and that they deserve our support. We should really get behind a theater or a dance house or a museum, because these are the things that make the world good. And you totally get the idea of it being non-profit, and that you believe that we should all be there. Some of these segments would like a private view behind the rope with the important people. I'm going to guess here that expression would like an open day with a kind of the whole of Oslo, here, with every kind of type of person. And that would make you happy, because it's like everybody engaging the arts, everyone together in a shared experience. And it's about expressing your affinity to that, but it's also about expressing your creativity. Release, anyone? It's release. Can I just tell you, you're just working too hard. That's basically it, right? So release is kind of an odd segment because it's slightly life stagey. It's kind of, most people in release say, I used to do more arts and culture. It's slightly odd because you work in the sector, but I used to work I do more arts and culture, but life's got in the way, kids, mortgage, job, whatever, and I'm just like, when do I have the time? And so what happens is they do stuff, but they tend to only do stuff that is unmissable, and therefore they tend to make relatively safe choices. They would take more risks if they had more opportunity and time. They don't even have the time to find out what's on. My wife's in this segment, so I know. So she relies on me to go, we should go to this thing. Actually, one of my colleagues has tried to use this as a dating app. No, it doesn't work, by the way. So perspective. Have we got any perspective in the house? Well done. Fantastic. Right. So perspective are really fascinated by certain things. So rather than having a general kind of a bit of everything, perspective tend to focus on things. They have things that they've chosen that they really, really like. And they tend to go quite deeply into those. And they tend to ignore other things because they know what they like. So they're quite inner-directed. They also quite like things that are quite solitary often. So they like, not everyone in this sector, but there's a higher than average things for reading, gardening, nature walks, things like that are very affective of the mood. But they also like documentaries, they like reading things, they like deep diving in, they like getting to the source of the real information. So they like to kind of be right at the heart of it. They tend not to be searching for lots of new opportunities. Mostly everyone else thinks they're missing out, and we better look for whatever we're missing out on. Perspective think they've probably already found it, so they're not really looking. So they're a nightmare to market to. Finally, entertainment. We got any entertainment in the house? Okay. Oh, fine. So entertainment are really quite different. They are very mainstream, quite consumer-led. If it's advertised, it must be good. If it's advertised on TV, it must be better. So the more advertised it is, the better it is. And also the more expensive it is, the better it is. In fact, it's reassuringly expensive. If it's not expensive, it's probably not very good. Telling them you're not for profit, it really knocks their confidence in how good you'll be. But they also don't make any distinction at all between, say, we all have categories, don't we? Theatre, museum trip, restaurant meal, to the beach. They don't have shopping. They don't have any categories. It's just stuff we could do outside of the house in our leisure time. And that's the competitive set. So you are literally competing with all of that. And so you'd better have something really good that's very well advertised. Okay. So to summarize, Essence got credentials, it's got depth, it's high quality, it's not mainstream. Expression, it's going to be immersive, emotional, we can all enjoy it together. Stimulation, new, unusual, different, best kept secret, pop-up, underground. Release, it's going to be relaxing. If it's the one thing you do this month, do this. Enrichment's familiar, classic, it's enjoyable, it's going to be successful. Perspective, it's going to be rewarding, and it's going to spark my imagination. I'm going to be able to go deep. Affirmation, it's new, unusual, and different. So we're trying new things, but we want new perspectives, but we want to choose things that are reasonably known. Entertainment's popular. It's probably got a celebrity in it. It's going to be fun. Okay, so so this is a slide from Ingrid that she showed yesterday, which is those segments' attitude to taking risks. Okay, look how different that is. How would you take risks? Okay, now let me show you the same thing by age. You'd think, well, would old people take more risks than younger people, or would middle-aged people? What is it? Not much difference. Yeah. So when we look at age, and that's because risk-taking is a mindset. It's not a birth date. It's how you think. Yeah. And as is pretty much everything. So it's psychographic rather than demographic. So the big question is this fixed or is it fluid? Are you born into the affirmation segment and that's it, that's your lot for life? Or, can you change it? So what we're really asking is it a trait that you have or a state that you're in that's flexible? Do we transition is the big question we're asking. Well, here's a map of the segments. This isn't a definitive because it's more like 3D, but the arrows show if you, no one's actually 100% any segment. It's like a recipe. So everyone's got a second segment, and these are the dominant second segments for each of these. So this is like a proximity map. You could change one or two of your answers on the little quiz you just did, and you could move segment. And that's okay, that's fine, because they're close to each other. Me, I could change almost every answer on my segment. I never get out of stimulation. I must be bang on the middle. Okay? Robin, the guy that actually did the algorithm, he changes one of his answers to strongly agree, slightly agree, he moves segment. But we're quite relaxed about that. You know this thing, all models are wrong, some of them are useful. This is useful. So don't mistake normal movement across the boundaries as a pattern, but there are patterns by age, and some segments do track a little older, and some track a little younger. This is another slide from Ingrid. So this is Norway on the left. This is young people on the right, so you can start to see that people are more likely to be entertainment, they're a bit more likely to be in stimulation. So you could kind of see that there are some differences. Now, we don't actually know, there is not enough data on this, we don't know whether that is a generational shift. Millennials are different, and they're wired differently, and that's going to be the new thing when they all grow up, or whether there is a little bit of transition. But let me give you some ideas. So young people are actively developing their personality. There's a lot of research on this, Bronfenbrenner, constructivism. So people are trying things on, and they're becoming they're shaping who they are. They're actively doing that. And so in that process, they might actually be slightly more fluid across some of these segments than others. There's a nice thing here. Look, at the top here, you've got adolescence's identity and confusion. So this is kind of who am I, what I want to be, and you're almost trying on different personalities as you settle on who you are as an adult. But college students in one study are already in some established categories. These are 3 categories from a big study done in 2010. They call them stoic individualists, responsible traditionalists, and thrill-seeking socializers. And we think they map straight on. This is like almost like they are in these groups they can't get out. We think they map straight onto our segments. Yeah. So essence and perspective at the top. You can see how this works. So what's interesting is it looks like by college age, people are kind of in what they're going to be. And other research suggests that it could be set as early as the age of 7. Some really interesting research from the University of California, looking at first-grade students and then looking at their personality types and then looking at them as adults 20 years later. And actually the same traits that they had as 7-year-olds are actually the same traits they have as adults. And the key factors in that study are things like self-confidence, communal versus self-sufficiency. Are you a group member, or are you more happier on your own? And are you in or outer-directed, which is what I started with essence. Do you make your own mind up, or are you influenced by the group? And segment change is driven by big changes in that context. And we see that to some extent in release. I said when kids and family and jobs get in the way, we can maybe move segment. But actually, things like this, look, divorce, death of a loved one, negative. Okay, your children leave home, your retirement, you get a new start, that potentially housing. Anything that causes you to do a reassessment of how you see yourself in the world. And I love this quote, a chance to be a different version of yourself. So often in retirement, people's cultural activity changes dramatically. So it's quite interesting. And what I would say is this just goes back to this. It's how we see ourselves in the world. So young adulthood often offers people a chance to be a different version of themselves. So they go to university, they go to a new city, they have new friends, they gain independence, they may be exposed to new ideas or values or cultures or mindsets. Maybe they get a new partner who has a totally different take on the world than they do and influences them greatly or introduces them to a new way of thinking. And I think that's why you get these changes. That's why you get some of these changes. And that's why some of this. But fundamentally what I would say is, even if there's a bit of fluidity, these are powerful, powerful segment types. And I just want to finish on one thing. I know I'm just slightly over. There's huge amount of background data on each of these things. Loads and loads of stuff on social media. So these are not just nice little pen portraits. They are based on huge amounts of data for targeting. And people are using this, integrating it with their planning, tagging all the records in their box office systems, and using this to drive their marketing. I want to finish on this one, which I think is lovely. Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment is a London-based orchestra. You might think this is very specialist, because they play a particular repertoire of music that's old, and they play it on very particular instruments. So you'd think, oh, that's going to be like the orchestra market, and then the kind of keen orchestra market, then the specialist orchestra. And these people are going to be niche of the niche of the niche. They don't think so. They say that this music was popular music of its time, and they're going to say, well, it should be now. And so they're targeting, they wanted to target young people, and their strategy for targeting young people is to target stimulation. They're not going to say, we're going to go for all young people. They say, we're going to go for stimulation, partly because they'll respond to it, but also partly because they'll tell everyone else. And this is how they've done it. They're not advertising Mozart or Beethoven. They're advertising tomorrow night, because what are stimulation going to do? Spontaneous. What are you doing tomorrow night? Nothing. Why? What's on? And at the top, I don't know if you can see it, it says, want some Beethoven and maybe a burger. Right? So, which no one's ever written that sentence before. And so this is their website, classical music minus the rules. So it's about rule breaking, and they did the same with a new venue, which is they said, like, you would not choose that photograph, would you, if you were doing a classic marketing campaign? And they're marketing this like a club, because it is a club. They're actually performing in a club, which is amazing. And then this was their response to the Brexit vote. They packed it out, I'm going to say that. And if you want to see how far they think they can push it, so they've been a bit cheeky, and so they're really pushing their luck here. And so what I'd say in the end is that you need to really understand audiences. You need to speak to them. You need to listen to them. You need to segment them in some way, and you need to change not only your programming and your communication to really push their buttons. Okay, thank you.